fall until we deal with the special within a special. Somebody make that motion, please. Is there a second? All in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The regular fall special town meeting is adjourned, and I call to order the special town meeting with one article, and I acknowledge the proper posting and publication of the warrant for this special meeting, and call your attention to the motion being made under the only article in this town meeting on page 1-3 that the town approve the name of the athletic fields at the Cypress Street Playground to include the name of Thomas Hennessy. Moved by Mr. Spiegel and seconded by Ms. DeWitt. Mr. Spiegel.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Stanley Spiegel from Precinct 2 and speaking for the Advisory Committee. For those of you who don't know Tom Hennessy, for whom this honor is being proposed, and it's been almost 20 years, amazingly, since he sat at the Selectmen's table. He was a rather special and super guy, a resident of the town, a citizen of the town. Let me tell you something about his background, which will help inform as to why this honor is appropriate. He was a star athlete at Brookline High School in three sports, track and field, basketball, and football. He starred in football at Holy Cross College and played 2 years for the then Boston Patriots, now New England Patriots. But then he pursued his career as an educator at Madison Park High School. Do I have that right? Yes. I do, thank you. Where he then became headmaster. And subsequently he became headmaster at Boston High School, and he was serving there during the days of forced busing, a very contentious time where he did a superb job in keeping his students safe, their morale high, and their education continuing during that tough time. He, meanwhile, in Brookline civic life, was elected to the school committee, where he served from the late 60s through the mid 80s. And he was chair of the school committee during a very rocky time as well, right after the onset of Proposition 2.5, where the whole town, including the schools, had to make dramatic cuts. But yet, as chair of the school committee, he helped shepherd through these changes in a way that managed to preserve most of the wonderful educational reforms that were instituted by our legendary school superintendent, Bob Sperber, who I point out still serves the town. He's a town meeting member. He's sitting over there, and he's been a member of EDAB for many, many years. Bob is a great superintendent. And Tom was a great chair of the school committee during a very tough time. He also played an important role in the enforcement of Title IX, that's a title which says that female athletes have to be afforded the same level of support as male athletes did, and he was a firm believer in that and in student athletics as well as in student academics. He was a very wonderful guy there. When he left the school committee, he became a town meeting member in 1990, and the following year was elected to the Board of Selectmen. And he served 2 terms and a year as chairman of the Board of Selectmen. And as far as anybody's been able to ascertain, he is the only person in the history of this town who served both as chair of the school committee and also as chair of the Board of Selectmen. His tenure on the board was also a contentious time. It was the time of the first Proposition 2.5 override that the town experienced, and he helped moderate and make for a successful override. He was noted, and by the way, others will tell you, fill in his background more than I can, but he was noted through his entire career as an athlete, but also as an educator and as a town a servant, a public servant in the service of the town, for his being a straight shooter, a person never looking to grab headlines or accolades, just doing his job and doing it in the best interest of the town, not concerned about his own political advancement. This did not color his votes. He always let you know where he stood. He and I were actually not terribly close politically, especially on the contentious issue of rent control, where I was more strongly for it than he was, and maybe he was on the other side.
You have 1 minute, 1 minute, Mr. Spiegel.
I shall finish in that time, Mr. Moderator. But one always knew where he stood, and one always knew that he was as good as his word. So to sum up, as an athlete, as an educator, it is singularly appropriate for the field right across from the high school to be named in his honor. And the reason we're taking this up under Article 1 of the special town meeting is because it was originally proposed that there be a 10-year limitation, a sunset provision on this honor, because there was some concern as to whether he had enough of an association with parks to have this be a permanent naming change, even though the Park and Rec Commission had decided unanimously to support it. So the selectmen were appealed to and have called for a special town meeting which rids the motion 14 under the regular article, under the regular warrant, of this provision, which many of us found to be inappropriate and even offensive. And I would urge, and the advisory committee near unanimously, with just a few abstentions, urges favorable action on Article 1 of this special town meeting, and no action when we get to Article 14 on the assumption that Article 1 passes, which I have high confidence it will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And Ms. Calico, would you please come forward and sit in the front row?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Members of the town meeting, my name is Bobby Allen. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 16, and I'm honored to stand up here tonight on behalf of a number of people that have helped get us this far to support voting in favor of the Cypress Street Playground to be named Thomas P. Hennessy Field at Cypress Street Playground. As Stanley explained, for procedural reasons, this special within a special was necessary in order to avoid the 10-year sunset provision, and a lot of thanks goes to Stanley for thinking this through. This has been supported by both Park and Rec and the naming committee. I want to thank former town clerk Jack Kendrick and other fellow BHS classmates of Tom for bringing this to light, and of course the current and past Board of Selectmen members for assisting carrying this through the process. Thanks also is due to the Park and Rec for ensuring that this proposal, and the naming committee for ensuring this proposal met the town policies and standards. I rise tonight for Tom because I owe all of my 25 years of public elected office, both as a town meeting member as a selectman, to Tom's advice and guidance. Now don't let that deter you from voting for this article. I was only 19 years old when I first ran for town meeting, and lost significantly. And Tom, I was driving around in my convertible. I had a little sign stuck in the convertible roof there to try to get people to vote for me, and it wasn't close. It was slates, it was rent control, and what does a 19-year-old know about that? Tom took me afterwards and said, "Kid, you did a good job. You know, I've known your family for a long time, and you hang in there, and you'll get elected eventually, and you're the future of this town." And I never forgot those words, and you know, to a certain degree, he put a little charge in my batteries to help me get where I wanted to go. So I have a lot to thank him. Now, Tom's accomplishments you heard from Stanley. You can read in the write-up, so I won't repeat them all, although they're very noteworthy, and I hope you do look at them. Distinguished athlete, town official, educator, but more important, great husband and a great role model for his kids. The 5 Hennessy boys grew up on Cypress Street, a short distance from this field that I hope soon bears his name. He later married his wife Mary and raised his family in Precinct 16. He raised 3 girls, Sarah, Tina, and Maria, all graduates of Baker and Brookline High, all have went to Ivy League schools and excelled in athletics and academics. 2 are in their school's Hall of Fame, much like Tom is in this building's Hall of Fame. And again, as Stanley said, he goes down as one of the only Brookline officials to serve as both chair of school committee and board of selectmen. But more than anything else, more than anyone else I ever met, he did this with such humility. He rarely talked about his success or accomplishments and served in all his capacities with distinction and pride. Off the field, away from public service, Tom served as a mentor and teacher in a variety of arenas. You heard he was assistant dean of men at Holy Cross College, teacher and coach at Brighton High, first headmaster of Boston Madison Park and at Boston High. When I was in law school, Tom initiated a program at Boston High to have law students tutor certain classes and teach them basic legal principles as a way to help keep them motivated. At the time, that was a very, very troubled high school. It had very low graduation rates and huge dropout rates. But what struck me most is when Tom walked into the room, he did not command respect for the students and faculty solely because he was the headmaster. He commanded respect because he held everyone accountable and treated every one of those kids with respect. He looked to the faculty as members of a team of educators and held them accountable as a member of the team. He built his staff like a coach would build a team and found the best available educators to suit the need that he was looking for. And both faculty and student responded positively to this team approach, and the school benefited. While serving on both the school committee and the board of selectmen, people always knew where Tom was coming from. He was always going to do what he felt in his gut was in the best interest of the town. Sometimes this put Tom in direct conflict with the positions of lifelong friends, neighbors, and even other board members. But Tom stuck with his gut, and particularly when he felt it was for the greater good. He was always willing to stand accountable for his decision, never backing away or sitting on the fence, and never took the easy way out. More often than not, his decisions proved to be correct. But he was never a renegade. Tom looked at his other board members as a team. His style was to bring people together to discuss. And while I'm not saying he was easily swayed, he always gave people the time to speak and always listened. Too often in politics, you have people who are too busy thinking what they're going to say next to actually listen. That wasn't Tom. When I was first running for selectman, Tom's advice was never stay longer than 2 terms. His feeling was that there are a lot of talented people in this town, and the town benefits from having change. It didn't matter to Tom who would be running against him or if he shared that person's politics. He felt that change was in the best interest of the town in the long run. Now, I ended up not listening to him, and a few people over here ended up not listening to him. but always admired that he stuck to his conviction. It was probably why Tom was elected chair of both boards, because his fellow members supported his loyalty, his opinions, and his team approach to governing, and for that the town benefited. When Tom was serving as selectman, Precinct 16 town meeting members would gather before every town meeting and listen to Tom's insight on warrant articles and how and why the Selectmen Advisory Committee came up with their respective positions. He never really strayed from neighborhood issues because he viewed himself still part of that Precinct 16 town meeting team. And for that, we as town meeting members benefited. At his funeral, I got to meet many of his Brookline High teammates, Holy Cross teammates, and fellow educators. When talking about Tom, the reoccurring theme I heard was fairness, accountability, team player, motivator, fiercely loyal. That's when it occurred to me. I think Tom excelled so much in everything he did, athletics, education, politics, and family, because he approached everything like a coach approaches a team. Don't take the easy way out. Do your job and be accountable for the decisions you make. Rely on members of your team, for the team is stronger than any one individual. And if you follow these basic principles, then everyone can benefit. Tom clearly left a legacy in Brookline and Boston sports scene. He left a legacy as an educator, but his legacy to the town as a whole is clearly noteworthy. It seems appropriate to me to acknowledge this humble man whose commitment to public life and team approach made a positive impact on the town. There's an old saying, there's no I in team, and there was no I in Tom. Please support this article.
Thank you. Ms. Calico.
Good evening. I'm Donna Calico, and I have had the pleasure of serving you and the citizens of Brookline from 1992 to 2003 as a selectman, and prior to that I was a member of the advisory committee and a town meeting members. It's a privilege to stand before you tonight and share some of my thoughts about Tom Hennessy as a public servant and my friend. On behalf of my former colleagues, Michael Merrill, Joe, and Bobby, Joe Geller and Bobby. We extend our thanks to the Park and Recreation Commission, the Naming Committee, the Advisory Committee, and in particular Stanley Spiegel, and the Board of Selectmen for their support of this article. You know, Tom has a long list of fans, but I had no idea how beloved he was to students, teachers, his colleagues on the school committee, and his long list of friends until I embarked on this public process journey. I'm going to expand a little bit about Tom's leadership and contributions during his 2 terms as selectman and 1 year as chairman, because I was with him during that time. I knew Tom since 1990 and served with him on the Board of Selectmen from 92 to 97 and built a friendship with him and Mary beyond his term in office. When I was elected to the Board of Selectmen in 1992, the town was in a fiscal crisis with a deficit. The statewide rent control issue was looming, and the potential retirement of town administrator Richard Leary was on the horizon, not unlike the real problems you are all facing today in Brookline. Tom was always prepared on every issue and never acted like a typical politician. He was decisive and thoughtful in defense of his positions he took, yet he delivered his remarks with a smile and a quip and a sense of empathy towards those affected. In '93, Tom was the decisive vote to hold off on rushing into a general override vote, wisely recognizing that more analysis was needed on this override question that only favored the schools, police, and fire. A citizens' override committee was established that recommended capital infrastructure needs for the entire town, including significant funding for the Public Works and Parks Department, along with funding for schools and public safety. Some of you may remember from that era the phrase, the shabification of Brookline, and look how far you've come. On September of 1994, former town administrator Richard Leary retired after many years of outstanding service. A search committee and process were established. Suffice it to say that excellent candidates presented themselves well and were seriously considered during the hiring process. However, the politics and outside pressures divided the board. Tom, acting as chairman of the Board of Selectmen, had the fortitude to assess the facts and the character to personally inform each of the final candidates of his decision prior to the vote. On the following Tuesday, the Board of Selectmen unanimously selected Richard Kelleher as our next town administrator for 16 years. What followed were years of fiscal discipline, financial and capital planning, and reserve buildup. That paved the way for decades of good governance and organizational leadership, contributing to a robust open space and recreation program. Tom Hennessy was an exceptional individual, as you've heard, whose character, courage, and leadership are worthy of this honor. His name is not a household name. His picture did not appear on the cover of People magazine, but his story is one each of us can tell our children and grandchildren, describing his leadership, teamwork, and integrity. He is one of Brookline's own. His athletic talents led him from fame to coaching. His education at Holy Cross led him from a degree to being a math teacher and a headmaster of Boston High School for 40 years. Peter Rowe tells me that he supervised by walking the halls with a clipboard in his hand. He did not seek higher office. He only was interested in serving the citizens on the school committee and Board of Selectmen. Tom Hennessy would have never wanted us to move forward with this honor. He was way too humble for that. But today we all can set the record straight about Tom and the example of his leadership and service, creating a legacy for all generations. Finally, we hope that this honor bestowed by the town will result in donations to support scholarships at Brookline High School and ultimately park maintenance needs. On behalf of my former colleagues and me, we urge you to vote favorable action on dedicating the fields at BHS as the Thomas P. Hennessy Athletic Fields at Cypress Street Playground. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sperber.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Robert Sperber, Precinct 6. I want to thank Donna and Bobby and Mike and Joe and Stanley for taking the leadership on this important occasion. Tom Hennessy was elected to the school committee on 2 separate occasions while I was superintendent. First in 1969, and then again in 1980. And in his first term, he was an enthusiastic supporter of such innovations as K-12 curriculum development, equalizing expenditures among the 8 elementary schools, introducing occupational education, open campus, METCO, facing history, and the expansion of varsity athletics, particularly for girl students. He supported these innovations because he knew as an educator that these were important innovations for children. And it was based on his own leadership and experience in the Boston Public Schools. The second time he was elected was when we had to dismantle many of these programs due to Prop 2.5. And as chairman of the school committee, he took great care to do this with as little harm to children as possible. I'd like to make one final note. If the town meeting tonight votes in favor of naming the field in Tom's name, we will also be honoring the Hennessy family. Tom's father was a member of the school committee before he left to serve his country in World War II, and then Tom's mother took her husband's seat on the school committee. And Tom's brother Jim was a respected member of the Brookline faculty for over 40 years. So I urge you to vote in favor of this motion to name the fields in Tom's honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Witt. And Mr. Merrill, if you're here, would you come forward, please?
I'm Betsy DeWitt, speaking for unanimous Board of Selectmen. What is in a name? It's a fair question. What are the characteristics and qualifications for bestowing a permanent honor, naming a public space for an individual person? I believe Tommy Hennessy had them all: leadership, integrity, commitment to fairness and equality, humility, and much more. He was an exemplary citizen, an educational leader, an independent thinker, and a thoughtful decision maker. I saw his leadership during the time he served on the school committee when I was PTO president at the old Lincoln School during the painful and difficult budget cutting after Prop 2.5 was passed. And later I chaired the advisory committee in 1994 when he chaired the Board of Selectmen. I saw how hard he worked to make sure that Brookline passed the first Proposition 2.5 override to address the town's serious overall financial crisis, and it also happened to include funding for increasing growth in school enrollment. Sound familiar, huh? In both cases, he was a powerful force and speaking for needs, and at the same time was calm, mostly, handling conflicts and also building coalitions. Tom was a role model for us all, a civic and educational leader, and an honest, decent human being. He loved Brookline, where he grew up and where he raised his family. He was an outstanding local athlete. What more could we ask in deciding to honor him by naming the Thomas P. Hennessy Fields at Cypress Street Playground? And by the way, it's a historic community park where in 1880 a running track was installed, and where over the years there have been track meets, baseball, and football games, the game he played so well. The unanimous Board of Selectmen recommends favorable action on Article 1 of the special town meeting and no action on Article 14.
On the motion on page 1-3, those in favor, please raise your hands. Those opposed, raise your hands. Motion carries by a vote of 208 to 1. I now call for a motion to dissolve the special town meeting within the special. Is there a second? Those in favor, please say aye.